Joining us now is Victor Davis Hanson, of course, from the Hoover Institution and a phenomenal writer. His new book, The Case for Trump, just came out. He joins us now. Victor, we're going to get into the Trump deal, but this Jussie Smollett case, I've got to just ask you about this briefly before we get into the travesty that was the Mueller probe. Any thoughts on this? All charges are dropped. He's going to do some type of community service, and they're sealing the entire case. Sealed.
Yeah, I think that this is just speculation. I have a feeling that the district attorney or the prosecuting attorney didn't want a OJ jury nullification psychodrama, so they probably felt they couldn't get a jury that would convict, and then they would bring in racism and all of these other charges. So they thought, you know what? And Smollett had said that he was going to fight, and he was building a community resistance effort to support him, and I think he thought, I'm in the driver's seat, so he may cut a deal, but it's not really a deal. He gets off with everything. There's no criminal record, so it's a bad thing to do.
Well, I guess repercussions. You can lie to authorities. You can make up attacks. You can claim racism. And you can just get away with it, picking up trash on the weekends.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he had become a hero of the community. That's what he was saying all the time. He was on talk shows and radio shows that he was being persecuted. So I think his attorneys went and said, you really want to have a show trial in Chicago because you're not going to win this. And they were probably right. They wouldn't.
No. Well, I think that's an excellent point. Of course, I'm not even thinking about how or whether a fair proceeding could be had in Chicago, and prosecutorial priorities and the other fish to fry, et cetera. Victor, this is what our friends over there at MSNBC are pivoting to this morning after the Mueller summary comes out. No collusion, no evidence, and not enough evidence to conclude or see any obstruction, because also no underlying crime. And now this is what they're moving to. Let's listen.
I think what's happening here is that Trump and his people are trying to discredit the entire canon of Russia-related reporting,
right? Irrespective of. By the way, if you watched last night, you've heard a lot of those clowns actually suggest that any Russian interference with the 2016 campaign,
right,
was a scam. They were sounding like Vladimir Putin last night. By the way, they were sounding like Russian state-run television last night.
Russian state television. They haven't changed one iota after this report.
Yeah, that's factually incorrect, because you've had the two reporters who really started the whole media collusion with the dossier, Michael Iskoff and David Korn, who published before the election all of these rumors to damage the Trump campaign. They've already admitted yesterday that it didn't make sense, because if Trump was in control of a Russian collusion narrative, then he wouldn't have had to send somebody over to find out what WikiLeaks was going to leak. And I think Iskoff said, well, they accused Don Jr. or the rest of these people of trying to finagle with WikiLeaks to get an advance notice. But why would they have to do that if they were working with the Russians and the Russians knew it? They would just give it. So the two perpetrators have now recanted and said this dossier was not founded and we were misled. So I think that MSC cable hosts are in a dilemma, because the very people they're relying on have already contradicted their own new narrative.
Well, how about Brennan saying he doesn't know if he received bad information, but he suspected that there was more than there actually was. But then he goes, well, it's not surprising. It's a high bar for criminal conspiracy. That's what he said yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, he's so hubristic. He hasn't, nemesis coming, because remember, he lied under oath to the Senate about snooping on the Senate staff computers. He lied to the Senate about the drone attacks. And he really did cede that dossier to Harry Reid. He's got a lot of criminal exposure, I think, and I think he's going to be one of the first people that we being the people, should be looking at in the aftermath of all this. Because if Mueller set the standard, if you lie to a federal official, we're going to go after you, or if you obstruct justice, we're going to go after you. if you leak, we're going to go after you. If you collude, we're going to go after you. Well, Brendan's got a lot of exposure. So does Comey. So does McCabe. They really obstructed the working of a FISA court by not giving them the necessary information to make a decision. They unmasked names that was illegally. They saw that they were leaked to the press. They lied under oath in the case of McCabe and probably Comey as well. And they hired a foreign national, Laura. I mean, they hired a citizen of a foreign country, Christopher Steele, to go work with other foreign nationals to undermine a rival campaign with the knowledge of Obama. I think the real question is, to what degree did Obama, was he ever briefed by Loretta Lynch or by McCabe or Comey or by Susan Wright about what was going on?
Well, what do you think needs to happen as far as a reckoning here, Victor? What should Barr absolutely get to the bottom of in order to really have some type of reset in this entire process and perhaps people going to jail?
Well, I think he's been pretty clever the way he's used Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein, remember, was the heart of the whole thing. He worked with McCabe to sort of that palace coup. He signed a FISA warrant. He wrote the memo about how to fire Comey, and yet he's still there. And I think Barr sees that the leftists praised him so much that there being a dilemma suddenly to turn on him. So I think with the Inspector General Horowitz and with Rod Rosenstein, Barr is going to try to use existing staff members to go after these people, because otherwise, if you get a special counsel, the very idea of a special counsel has been pretty much tarnished now by the Mueller investigation.
Well,
and I don't think we'll ever see one again in our lifetime.
Well, I have to say that there is not only domestic repercussions here, or it was the ripple effects domestically that were so bad. So many people caught up in this, all the money spent on lawyers, all the hours and hours was spent, but also the opportunities that we don't know, we can't really quantify what opportunities were lost, missed opportunities for our government, for our policy, for maybe even on occasion working with Russia, because
absolutely.
This investigation was hanging over Trump.
Yeah, I've written about that. I mean, Kissinger was right when he said we want to always make sure that China and Russia are no better friend to each other than each one is to us. And so on matters of Iran, on Venezuela, or North Korea, we could have triangulated and used Russia as a foil in various scenarios. We couldn't do it, and the irony was that if you look at exactly what Trump did with arming the Ukrainians or attacking Russian mercenaries in Syria, or they beefed up sanctions, oil production, he was so much tougher on Russia than was the Obama-McFaul reset, and yet he couldn't do anything. If he mentioned the word Russia, he was considered a treasonous president or a traitor. So we lost that really important lever in American foreign policy.
Yeah, so China, we didn't have any opportunity to box out China. And so now Russia and China are doing joint military exercises.
They are. And we'll see if I think we're lucky that we have two really capable people in Pompeo and Bolton, and maybe they can restore some use of the Russian card. I hope they can. But have you noticed, I've noticed listening to people and getting in arguments with people, the left has a new narrative, and it is, well, if you guys believe that the Mueller team was biased from the outset, maybe it was, and that's even good for you, because that shows you that even a biased team exonerated Trump. And then that argument, of course, assumes that 22 months and $30 million didn't do any damage to people like Michael Flynn or Carter Page or the country at large, or as you say, the foreign policy. So that's their new argument. Let's just call it quits, and maybe they were biased, but that works in your favor because they found your guy exonerated. Let's just forget it. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Victor, on the issue of the relationship with Russia, now all these people who are all on board with the Hillary reset and thinking it's time to turn the page from the old, Cold War era, we've entered this new period, Reagan's long gone, now it's, reset the relationship. Now, this is what the genius of Crazy Mazie Hirono from Hawaii is saying.
So just because there was not enough evidence for a criminal charge of conspiracy does not mean that this very cozy relationship that Donald Trump has with Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, must be really happy that this came about, that this kind of cozy relationship that is not good for our country, in that it's not transparent, will continue.
So that's it now. It's a cozy relationship. It's too cozy. It's inappropriate contact. That's what they've moved to.
I don't think that. I mean, I was at Stanford when the ambassador under Obama, Mike McFaul, my colleague, brought in the Russian ambassador to the United States. They had a big cozy dinner, and just before Trump was elected, the whole idea was, tell Vladimir that I'll be more flexible after the elections type of appeasement. And so and the ambassador Kislyak in Washington was just loved by the left. He appeared in photo ops with all of them. So I don't think that's going to work very well. And we're going to see a lot of that. But the bottom line is that they used that dossier to get as an insurance policy in anticipation of a landslide victory in 2006. They being Obama officials and Hillary Clinton campaign colluders along with the media. And then when that didn't work out, it became a secondary transformation into aborting a presidency and maybe even being a preemptive defense for a lot of people who had legal exposure. So when you talk about John Brennan and Clapper going on TV, these were people who had both lied under oath to Congress and had seeded that dossier and may have had advanced knowledge of informants in the FBI, et cetera. And so now that all of that's out, I think Trump will be advised by his lawyers to start issuing documents and releasing information with no redactions. And let's see what it shows up.
We're talking to Victor Davis Hanson here on the Laura Ingraham podcast. And meanwhile, as all of this Russia Mueller report was unfolding, we have another growing caravan approaching the United States. We're on track for now almost 100,000 families, 120,000 families have been released into America since December. 76,000 individuals crossing the border in the month of February. It looks like more now in the month of March. What now? Doesn't Trump have to now crack down on this? I mean, this is just ridiculous.
Yeah, he does. Except he's starting to look prescient, and he warned people when he evoked a national emergency that in the spring and summer when the weather got more conducive, these caravans would start reappearing, and they're going to do that. So we should expect by June it's going to be a massive influx. He's going to have a much greater argument. And as someone who lives in an area where illegal immigration is ramping, I can tell you in May, June, and July, the whole atmosphere changes. People come in warm weather. And I think you're going to see that happen. And you know what? It's sort of a sign of things with the Southern Poverty Law Center imploding, the college admissions scam, that's the Mueller investigation, this new caravan, and then all of these lunatic positions by the progressives, whether it's reparations or infanticide. You're starting to see the wages of hardcore progressivism, and they lead nowhere but to nihilism. And so I think they've really been hurt by this, Laura, and I think that maybe in a week, if Trump plays his cards right and his tweets right, he'll get back up to 50% in some major poll.
Well, he should be up to 50%. He should be up at 58%. Janet Napolitano, former DHS secretary, she was on CNN this morning and said this.
The Pentagon just announced last night that it has transferred this $1 billion from its military personnel budget to build these 57 miles of fencing along the border. Is that a good use of its money?
Look, as I say in my book, a wall is a symbol. It's not a strategy. And really, for the southwest border, you need a combination of manpower and technology, air cover, and you need to focus on the actual ports of entry and the kind of technology deployed at the points of entry. So to effectively reappropriate money from other essential uses to build more structure along the border, to me, is security theater. It's not really security.
Well, she says it's a symbol, but walls have protected man and mankind for millennia.
Yeah. I don't put much currency in her. She gave us the term, remember, overseas contingency operations for terrorism. She said that when she was working for Obama that the greatest threat we had were returning vets that could be potential terrorists. And she oversees a UC campus where there's a state law that says you can't use race as a determinant in hiring or admissions, and yet we know that her campus has systematically discriminated against Asians for years. So it's just another idea that you go on the offensive, you make these statements, and you're never held accountable for your own record. Anyway.
No, to me, again, for the Obama folks to be saying and trying to act like this is somehow returning to like East German style Brandenburg Wall is ridiculous. I mean, they're the ones who were saying that all these people who came across the border in 2014, they would all have to go home. That's what President Obama said. You don't come because you're gonna be sent back. And then suddenly,
she trumped that. She trumped that and said, "Don't think that unattended children won't be sent back, i.e., by themselves." It's sort of Orwellian now.
Yeah, well, this is absolutely Victor Davis Hanson here on the Laura Ingraham Show.